Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first NYVC, Boston VC, San Francisco VC, London VC, and Sport Hiatus office hours. There are many virtual conferences that go on, but it's our attempt to try to do something a little bit different. And I wanted to welcome everybody, give a little bit of a background around what we're up to. First, I want to say sending positive energy to everyone in our industry. NYVC Sports was created with the intention of bringing together all the entrepreneurs, all the investors, and all the sports executives through free events. The intent was, how do we super connect? While entrepreneurs were going to hackathons and meetups, and investors were headed to conferences and retreats, and the sports business was heading to meet around live sporting events and other areas. There wasn't a community back in 2011 that brought everybody together. And so that was our intent. I met Deepan Parikh, my co-founder. He was an investor. Now he's crushing it at Courtside Ventures. And the thought was, how do we bring these communities together? And so we're now 9 years into running in New York. We've created an amazing advisory board of individuals who I hope we get a chance to thank throughout the process today, or at the end of the session today. Really what the intent was is to bring these groups together in a unique way. One of my favorite topics was around a subject called No Home Games. We brought together Tough Mudder, WWE, professional bull riders, and the conversation was, what's it like to have no home venue? So if you have ideas, please contact us on any of our sites or on social media, where it's a community created by sports executives for sports executives, and it just super connects these groups. What I wanted to add is, about a month ago, exactly 5 weeks ago today, actually, is when the NBA suspended its season. And it's amazing how much it feels like it's been a super long time ago, but really was only 5 weeks. And there are a lot of arguments to talk about how patterns are created through doing something consecutively 21 days. Well, we're now 35 days into that time frame, and it's going to be very interesting to see how patterns change in the way we consume technology, consume content, create content, and what will become the new next normal around sports media and technology. We've launched Sport Hiatus for the purposes of being an editorial voice to celebrate and recognize during an unprecedented, crazy, scary time, all of the creativity, unique content, innovation that's going on around our industry. And so with that, a lot of new features are coming. We're rolling them out every day. It's the industry's community. And as people have ideas to join as partners, as contributors, please be active on social media at Sport Hiatus or at NYVC, or hashtag Sport Hiatus or hashtag NYVC. But that was really the intro that I wanted to provide for context. And most importantly, get out of the way, because we have two true professionals, great friends, and really smart individuals, and I want to get out of the way and let these guys do their thing. So with that, it's a pleasure to introduce John Kosner and Rich Greenfield, and we'll be going for the next 45 minutes or so. There is a form to submit questions, so please do so if you'd like, and we'd love to engage the audience in a fun way. We'll also have some fun tools in the right rail to submit sentiment analysis and some polls and some live blogging and other features as well. So enjoy, and I'll be back at the very end. Thank you, guys. John and Rich, take it away, please.
Hey, thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. Rich and I are thrilled that over 500 people have signed up today. Most of all, we hope you're all doing well and coping. We plan to fill the next hour with a little mirth and perhaps even some insight. So welcome to New York VC Sports' first office hours. This is presented as part of the new, aptly named Sport Hiatus site. We want to thank Carlo DeMarcus from Delta Tray for the name, and our friend, the talented, tireless, and taciturn Jeff Volk for putting this program together. So please note, the Sport Hiatus logo, top left, you'll see sports resolving to a pause graphic, a period, and a down toggle, one of the most inspired things that we've seen recently. The interactivity during the conversation with Rich, you'll see today, comes courtesy of our colleague Mahir Wallawalkar and LiveLike. It was to be featured in the March Madness On Demand app, but that, like the rest of sports, is on hiatus. So instead, you'll see it here first, and it's great. As Jeff said, you can leave questions below. And if you like this program and are able, please consider clicking the yellow tip jar button and making a donation to benefit everything that NYVC Sports is doing to build the entrepreneurial community here in the Big Apple and elsewhere. So today, April 15, is normally tax day. And that's how many in the media industry feel when Rich Greenfield decides to aim his byline at them. Rich is an original, an entrepreneurial analyst, a futurist. He's as comfortable thinking about new ways to do things as he is eager to get into the weeds on the finances and financial engineering of our beloved legacy media. While Rich is feared in some quarters, he's probably disliked in others. One thing about him, everybody respects his work ethic and his intellect, and everybody I know reads him. At heart, Rich is a great reporter. He is out to get the story. He is fearless, and he is a student of the game. So, Rich, welcome.
Thanks for having me, John.
And since this is office hours and people have more time on their hands, unfortunately, I'd like to talk a little bit about your path and how you got here.
You know, first of all, I hope everyone listening is safe and healthy and hopefully socially distanced. This is a tough time for everyone. And you know, I think what is life sort of feels like Groundhog's Day right now in terms of you know, the how similar every day is to the next. And so it's really nice to actually be able to interact with people, answer questions, talk with, look, I could talk to you forever, but I think it's really nice to involve the community and get hundreds of people into a dialogue on what's happening in sports, media, and tech. For me, you know, how I got here, you know, I'd always had a passion in sports and media and kind of the collision of the two. I almost actually went to Newhouse to do sports broadcasting, ended up doing sports broadcasting and getting a liberal arts degree at Brandeis and running a radio station though. So in many ways combining sports, media, and technology during college and came out of college and went right into research on media stocks at Goldman Sachs, and have literally for the last 25 years, that's all I've ever done. Although, you know, I think about in 1995 when I started at Goldman was the year Disney bought ABC, and they got this little asset at the time called ESPN. And, you know, if you think about, you know, how the media tech universe has changed, the biggest thing happening in 1995 in media technology wise was literally the creation of the DVD. If you think about, you know, the discussion of media, sports, and tech today, I mean, we could spend hours, let alone the next 45 minutes. There are so many different aspects to think about, and the industry has changed. And what was covering stocks like Disney back in 1995 is now Facebook to Netflix to Twitter, Snapchat. I mean, the universe of quote unquote, what is a media company, sort of technology is infused into every media company that's out there. And even companies that avoided technology in many ways are now being forced, given the consumer shifts, are being forced to kind of dig deep or, you know, basically jump into technology and full steam ahead. I mean, Peacock just launched today. Disney Plus launched a few months ago. HBO Max is launching in a couple of months. And so it's been fascinating to see this industry evolve and to cover it through so much change. And I think what's fascinating is that their change today is actually, I think, the fastest we've ever seen the industry changing throughout my 25-year career looking at this space.
So as someone who reads you, plus the work of your colleagues, Brandon Ross and Walt Piecyk, read you religiously, I feel like your group has a thesis about what media companies need to do now.
I think that's true. You know, I think a lot of people that write about the industry, whether they're in the press or other analysts that I compete against across the broader Wall Street universe, I think a lot of them do reporting. And I think our job is to be more than a reporter. I really think we have a view of what these companies should do. And, you know, sometimes people say we should just report rather than be advocates. But I think we have a strong feeling of what some of the right choices are. And I think we've learned looking at some of what other companies have done. And in many ways, I think a lot about that famous Bezos quote of, you always have to be leaning into the future. Otherwise, it's going to literally hit you, hard. And I think a lot of media companies, it's very hard to cannibalize yourself. It's very hard to, when you've got people in jobs that are going to be displaced, when you've got revenues and profits that are going to be displaced, it's very hard to pivot your business and do something that cannibalizes yourself. And that, it's sort of not executive behavior, right? I mean, people are compensated millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. And you're talking about doing things that may very well lead to making less money for years in hopes of building something that you haven't done before. And so leaning into technology, look, I've never run a business. I've run my own light shed business, but I've never run kind of a corporate media organization. And so I don't know what it's like to have tens or hundreds of thousands of employees working for me. But what I can say is that the consumer behavior is changing, whether media companies like it or not, and they're going to have to adjust. And I think you're finally seeing, we used to talk 6 or 7 years ago, the topic of cord cutting. I mean, we came up with a hashtag called Good Luck Bundle, and people used to make fun of it. Like, what is this guy talking about? Like, the bundle's fine. And, 100 million people were subscribing to multi-channel television. And, now we're in a world where, this year, ESPN and Fox Sports 1 and CNN, I mean, these cable networks are going to have less than 80 million viewers, a level that hasn't been seen in 20 years in terms of people subscribing to the bundle. And so, yeah, I think we have very strong opinions that these companies need to be far more aggressive in embracing technology, worry a lot less about near-term earnings. And really, I think if you wanted to put it, put a kind of like understand it in its simplest form, they need to think about technology in the same way they think about content. An engineer is just as important as a great movie, a great TV show. The engineering and technology, they are hand in glove at a company like Netflix. You can't separate the two, and you need to view technology as just as important, just as well compensated in your business. And I know you came from the tech world at ESPN, in kind of building their digital efforts. And I think it really is important that every one of these companies literally align those in parallel and don't, create kind of different levels of what's important.
Listen, I couldn't agree more. From the Star Wavers who created ESPN.com, and they were led by Mike Slade and Tom Phillips and Jeff Reese, and Aaron LaBerge, who is still there, is now the essentially the CTO for all of the DTCI enterprise. That's Disney Plus. We used to have an expression, which is that technology is product, it is content. Yeah. And some of the most successful things we ever worked on, like fantasy games, for instance, it was a combination of the content and technology. But let's turn to sports. So like everyone else on this call, you're a big fan. But for the first time in any of our lives, sports is dormant. I remember vividly being in New York after 9/11. I went with my dad to Game 5 of an opening round baseball series between the Yankees and Oakland. And the feeling in the stadium was so powerful that I couldn't believe there's any way that Oakland could win that game. I'd never forget that evening. And we've always had sports, to sort of help us get through, really difficult times. And this is the most difficult, but now it's not here. When it does come back, and we're not going to actually get into when it's going to come back because we've agreed neither of us know, but when it does come back, do you think it will have the same impact on our lives? More impact, less impact? Have you thought about that?
I think about it a lot because, the reality is that despite the fact that essentially everyone in this country, let alone across the world, unless you're an essential worker having to go into the office, everyone's sort of trapped at home. And so, logic would dictate historically that TV ratings would be at, all-time highs. And meaning linear TV, watching ABC, watching, Fox News, watching CNN, whatever, all of these networks, you would literally think that this is all-time highs for television. And look, ratings are up. I mean, they're up double digits. But when you consider the fact that they're not up 50 to 100% or, it's literally skyrocketing, I think it's, there's two main factors going on. One is that the shift to streaming has taken over. And so for entertainment television, there's no doubt that the best content, the most ambitious content is on Netflix, HBO, Amazon, Hulu, etc. But I do think that, sports is probably far more important to why you turn the television on than we ever realized. And when there's no sports, you literally just don't even think about turning on the TV at all, or at least for a large percentage of the population. And so, I think in many ways, what we're seeing right now is that people are kind of just forgetting about TV because they're not watching sports. And I think that's something that the whole industry's got to think about. I'm sure, look, when sports come back, I don't care whether there's fans, I don't care which sport it is. I think right now we all would almost watch anything. Like, I don't care whether it's golf or NBA. I mean, I'd actually, high school basketball would do it for me right about now. So, I think ratings will be astronomical. I do, though, question, for how long will fanless sports be interesting? I think football is unique in that there aren't that many games. I do wonder, would you watch 100 baseball games without fans? Like, how does it start to get sort of not interesting? And can technology maybe figure out some solutions to help recreate some of that community experience? Because I think, you go to, we're potentially talking about not just not going to a stadium, John. We're talking about you can't go to a bar and watch a game potentially with a large group of your friends. You're not even sure whether you can have your friends over for watching the game with a beer on a Saturday night. And so, the loneliness of watching sports, you see it with Netflix. People right now are creating Netflix watch parties with plugins on Google Chrome. People are dying to have a communal experience right now.
Totally. So one thing I wonder is, going forward, where is all the money going to come from to support the sports industrial complex? Traditional pay TV was shrinking and challenged before COVID-19. Leagues traditionally draw significant revenue from national broadcasters, ESPN, Fox, NBC, CBS, Warner Media, and local regional players such as Sinclair and Comcast. Now all of those players are impacted. As you've written, over-the-top direct-to-consumer is not the same business as traditional pay TV. Gate is significant, but again, all live events are impacted by the virus when sports comes back. During my career, sports has always operated like a growth stock, where the big money where's the big money going to come from now from sports? I'd like to start off, Rich, just on the local level. Is local more of a hot zone, more of a problem area than national? So here I'm talking about the RSNs and local rights.
It's interesting, right? Because, if you separate, when you think about the local issue, you have to sort of separate sports, right? Because you've got a sport like football where there basically is no local. I mean, even local is still on broadcast TV as part of that, broad reach mechanism. Whereas, local sports, when I think about, the regional sports networks, remember these games used to be, I remember watching, the Mets and Yankees on local broadcast TV, but all of those games now have essentially migrated over to regional sports networks over the last, call it 15, 20 years. And so, you have to have pay cable in order to have the Yes Network or SNY or Fox Sports Southwest or whatever it may be. And the question is, we were talking before about that 100 million cable subscribers shrinking to 80. It's probably going to 50 or less over time, just as, the bundle basically gets left as sports fans. And, 50 million households willing to pay for sports is nothing to sneeze at or to dismiss, but it is very problematic from the revenue model that all of these, and profit model that all of these cable networks expected. And I think when you think about the regional sports networks, the question becomes, if you're a team, and I've talked to, whether it's Mark Cuban, I mean, all of the different NBA, Adam Silver's talked openly about this. They're basically attached to cable in every part of their model, the national games on TNT, the local games on RSNs. And the question is, you're losing reach, because as people disconnect their cable subscriptions, their satellite subscriptions, the NBA, MLB, NHL are losing reach. And so the question becomes, do you shift more games? Do you go back to that model of years ago and go back to broadcast TV? How do you do that? A lot of the teams own these regional sports networks. They have long-term contracts with these regional sports networks. So there's no like quick, easy fix to it. But I do think the local problem is more significant than the national problem, because because at least you have a sport like football that's kind of across the national broadcast channels, giving them better reach. But I think this comes to a bigger fundamental question that you're sort of hitting at here in terms of how you frame the question, which is, if you go back to 1994, I think of the modern day sports right escalation that has made money for leagues, for players, coaches, the whole ecosystem. Started with Rupert Murdoch in 1994 outbidding CBS for football rights. That was a fundamental moment where you had, 3 players that had rights, and all of a sudden a new player came to town, stole the rights, and it set off a multi-decade long bidding war for sports rights. The question now is, will there be new bidders for sports rights? We've seen Amazon snack on tennis rights overseas, and Facebook play around with 20 baseball games, and YouTube TV's done a little deal for, for MLS, but nobody's done, quote unquote, a big deal. Like, no one's come on and bought big rights. Now, local may be easier to answer your question, because if you're a local fan, I would argue if you're Amazon and you have Yes Network games, or if you're Facebook and you had Mets games, the local game, you're probably a diehard fan. Like, you're not watching that regional sports network unless you're a diehard. And so you'll get the diehards to go wherever the games are. And so I think local actually is an easier place for technology to play a role. The problem for national sports, I don't care whether we're talking football or baseball or hockey, any of these sports, the fundamental problem you run into is, how do you get the casual fans to even know the games are on these digital platforms, and how much viewership do you sacrifice? Yes, they have wide reach. Amazon reaches 70. There's probably more people that have Amazon Prime right now in the US than have ESPN. So you have the reach, but I don't think people are going to Amazon for football unless they're a diehard. And so do you lose all of the casual fans? And does that have very long-term negative effects on that sports, that league, those teams, those players' careers and salaries? And so I think technology will play a greater role in local, my gut instinct is, than national, at least over the next several years.
But it's interesting, because the games on broadcast, say the National Football League, is still part of the pay TV environment, because retransmission consent over the last, listen, at least since Les Moonves had the breakthrough where it could be, where retransmission consent could be ascribed just to an over-the-air broadcaster, that's really contributed to a lot of the rights fee increase. And retransmission consent, again, is part of the whole pay TV equation. So if that shrinks below 80, some of the money that's essentially being transferred to sports leagues gets affected there too, doesn't it?
I think if I was sitting in, pick your commissioner, I don't think it matters. But if you're sitting there and you're looking at a pay TV universe that's gone from, 100 million down to 80, and you're fearful that, that the number of what I would call sports fan households, and I'm sure this community, if you took a poll, I'm sure there's a wide degree of views of how many people consider themselves an avid sports fan. But remember, I'm not talking an avid sports fan of just one sport. We're talking about you're subscribing for the full year to the big cable bundle. Are there more than 50 million households that would pay for the full year? And so the question becomes, if you think about 80 million households moving down towards 50, and then add on to it the fact that, like, global recession, this pandemic, what it's going to do to, with record high unemployment, like on the other side of this, we could see a real acceleration towards these numbers as you think about 2021. But put that aside for a second. If you believe over 5 years, you're going from 80 million homes to 50 million homes, the question becomes, is there an economic model for any of these sports cable networks that actually keeps them anywhere near as profitable as they used to be? I'm not sure there is. I mean, I think this is a very tough time. You're going to be spending more for sports rights because it's competitive. I mean, all of these broadcasters want them. Technology is kind of like nipping at their heels, and you're scared of them coming in and doing something big. And so you're spending more on these rights at the same time that your advertising is no longer growing. Forget about even what COVID is going to do to it. But you've also lost subscribers, and you're probably going to lose subscribers at an accelerating rate. You know, this was a great business at 100 million subs. This was a great business at 90 million subs. At 50 million subs, I don't think you can charge people enough per month to make up for it. I mean, think about your viewers. I mean, if you live in New York City, let's just do a little math for your New York City viewers right now. And this is, you know, similar in many other places, but New York is just so extreme. You are paying $8 to $9 a month for MSG Network when you pay for cable. You're paying $6.50 for the Yes Network. You're paying probably $4 for SNY. You're probably paying $9 for the suite, if not more, for ESPN and ACC and all of those networks. You're probably paying another $2 to $3 for TBS and TNT, maybe even $3.50 for TBS and TNT, which has NBA and MLB. Like, probably paying $2 for FS1. I mean, think about, you know, you're closing in on, you know, $40 a month. What
Just
if you're
for
not
sports.
a sports? And what if you're
Right.
not a sports fan? Like, what if you're literally just not a sports fan? And look, I'm a big sports fan, but I'll tell you, I can't watch a Knicks game. Like, I mean, that is just too painful. I don't have the tolerance to do that to myself and torture myself, but yet I'm paying $8 for MSG all year long. You know, I would argue that if you think about the corollary in the universe that we're thinking about of technology, which I think is important to this whole sports VC community, I would bet that nobody who is watching this video right now has Netflix and actually doesn't want to pay for it. Because if they don't want Netflix, they can literally click cancel. As fast as I can say cancel, they can click cancel and stop their subscription. Whereas you have no ability to say, nope, I don't want ESPN, or nope, I don't want MSG. You literally can't do that unless you cancel your entire subscription. And so it basically forces you to cut the cord if you want to reduce that cost. And I think that's just the, you know, it is the inflexibility of that legacy business model versus the flexibility of technology that I think is working against the whole industry right now.
Yeah. So every year before CES, you put out predictions for the new year, and you did what I thought was an excellent post, 20 predictions for 2020. And you really got into some thinking about the upcoming NFL television negotiations. And in your piece, you favored Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, and Facebook all joining Fox, ESPN/ABC, NBC, but not CBS. I thought your thinking was really interesting on how you got to the different acquisitions. Does it still hold today with COVID going on?
You know, it's funny. I was thinking last night. You know, I was reading an article on all-time record highs, and Amazon hit a record high last night. Its market cap, just for clarity, John, it has a $1.1 trillion market cap. Viacom is sub 10 billion, and that's after the acquisition of CBS. And forget about leverage and debt and all of that. It's just staggering to think about how small companies like Viacom are versus this tech universe. If Apple or Amazon want to be in the sports business, forget about whether it's economical in the short term, but if they want to basically, I always think about sports as a Jenga game. And it's, you know, the Jenga game is kind of holding up the bundle. The entire bundle is being held up by sports. And if you pull that last piece out, the entire multi-channel video bundle, cable satellite bundle basically collapses on itself. And so they have the power to do that. On the flip side, they may also just see that the bundle sort of collapsing on itself all on its own. And so why go in and spend lots of money on sports rights when you don't have to? I still think that, I think DirecTV has been pretty clear. AT&T has been pretty clear that they do not want to spend on Sunday tickets. So Sunday tickets going to end up in somebody new. That product feels like it should be digital. It is not a broadcast product, meaning it's not wide. It's always been a premium product. It seems perfectly suited to Amazon, Apple, YouTube TV. I mean, that's where it sort of makes the most sense to me. In terms of the big packages on Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, it's going to be very hard to convince the NFL to move those packages away from broadcast. Now, there may be required simulcast. So just like Thursday night is simulcast on Amazon, we may live in a world where every single package is simulcast. Because I don't think nobody is not watching Fox on Thursday. Like, no one's canceling their cable subscription because the Thursday night game is also streamed on Amazon and Twitch. So I think the NFL has done a great job. I think, Brian Rolap and that team has done a great job of expanding the reach of the sport without cannibalizing kind of legacy partnerships. And I think they should get a lot of credit for trying and pushing the envelope on trying to expand reach. The question, though, that you're asking basically is, if you're sitting in the NFL's shoes, what do you do with these smaller players? I mean, when you look at the size and scale of companies like Viacom and Fox relative to the Comcast's, Comcast is still, a $200 billion company, and Disney, even with all of its troubles right now, is still a $190 billion company. The size and scale of the competition is so different that you do have to wonder, especially in an economic cycle like we're probably going to be in, with leverage for many of these companies way higher than they ever anticipated. You do have to, I feel even more confident that CBS is in a tough position today than I did back then. This is not a great position to be in, having high leverage, having falling advertising revenues. It is just a really scary place for them. They really need to be part of an even larger company than they are right now to really protect the whole company's asset base. And I don't see National Amusements owned by the Redstone family. I don't see them selling that asset. I think they're going to try to work their way out of this. And look, maybe there's an argument for the NFL to sell the rights to CBS simply to keep everyone in place. But I don't know. There is certainly, you could make a really good rationale for, if you gave 2 sets of rights to Comcast or 2 sets of rights to Disney, or you sold maybe a different package to maybe you sell a live package to TBS and TNT. I mean, I don't think that's, could you do interesting things with HBO Max and TBS and TNT? Yes, it's cable versus broadcast, but I think there's a lot of moving pieces right now. But I have to believe that this pandemic has only made life harder, not easier, for companies like Viacom.
So lots of great questions coming in. We invite you to submit them. Here's a layup question for you, Rich, and the people asked it twice. What do you predict the ratings will be for the NFL draft? It's coming up next week, next Thursday.
God, I am so excited that Roger Goodell is still doing an NFL draft. I mean, look, it is going to be the only. I mean, John, you saw. I was literally rewatching, Patriots Giants on Sunday afternoon at 3:00 on Fox. Like, we're all desperate for anything sports at this point, if you're a sports fan. So the NFL draft, I'm sure it's going to be weird, right? Like, doing it remotely. I assume we're going to see people and players getting drafted from their homes. I mean, this is going to be the weirdest draft in history. And, MGM Resorts was going to have players literally floating down the red carpet at the Bellagio. I mean, this was going to be the biggest cinematic draft ever. And ESPN and ABC were going to make a huge deal of this kind of cross-platform, and instead it's going to be all virtual. It's going to be weird, but I truly believe that this will be the biggest ratings the draft has ever seen. Wow. Simply because there's no sports, and we're all stuck at home, and we're all looking for, to infuse some sports into our lives. And so I do think it's going to be pretty exciting to have something in the sports world actually happen next week. I'm certainly rooting for it to go off great. I mean, I don't know exactly what to expect from a production standpoint. But the good news is they've had several weeks to kind of set the planning for this. And so I'm hopeful, and I think ratings are going to be great. Look, I think ratings, when and if, look, we don't know when sports are coming back. You said that at the outset. It's hard to predict. And I'm sure it's more, forget about what Trump says. It's probably going to come down to what governors and even commissioners of leagues and teams and players. I mean, you look what Adam Silver did. He started this process by basically saying no more sports, and Duke shut down the tournament basically by them saying we're not participating. And so this is less a president or even a governor issue, and probably more of sort of all of the individuals involved. I have no idea, but whenever they're ready to play under whatever circumstances they play, I think the fan base is going to be something like you've never seen before, because people are just starved for this content.
I agree. Another good question. Thoughts on how teams monetize the only live sports content being created now, players going live on Instagram and teams streaming all games on Facebook Watch. I would add a different wrinkle to this though, Rich, is with technology, a conundrum for leagues today is that there's all this viewing of content that is essentially free and no one pays for. Our children, have lots of examples. They're watching NBA highlights, they're tuning into players, they're getting interested, they're being able to follow things with absolutely no money flowing to anybody. I don't view that as sustainable either, although obviously I understand the appeal of getting something for nothing. So the question is, like, did you think about a generation that's going to watch less full games? What are the implications of that, and what do the leagues now have to do?
I mean, if you think about it, right, the NBA has been a real leader in technology and getting clips and highlights. And, the reality is, even if they weren't, it probably would be coming out illegally and people would be, pushing all of this content out on their own, and the league would
Right.
have to be playing whack-a-mole trying to take it down. So
good luck with
I'm not
that.
right. So I'm not sure that there was an alternative, and I give Adam and his team a lot of credit at the NBA for making content available and making players into superstars by embracing technology and making it easy to consume this content. But look, you hit the nail on the head. There's a whole generation that doesn't believe they have to watch whole games. I mean, shortened replays, highlights on Twitter, it is all changing. House of Highlights is basically defined why you don't need to watch a live NBA game. And I don't think there's any way around that. And that all sort of feeds into the drop of 100 million households to what is 80 today and probably going towards 50 or less. There's no way around that. I think all of the leagues are going to have to figure out how they either, one, generate new revenue streams. So, is there a great way for monetizing highlights? No. I mean, can you sell rights to Twitter and Snapchat? Sure. But it doesn't replace when you're getting $9 a month for ESPN and that money is then paying for sports content. There's no business model as good as, if you think about it, I steal this quote from Peter Chernin because he created this years ago, but he goes, there'll never be a better business model than 100 million people paying for something that most of them don't want. I mean, there is just nothing that's going to be as good as that. And you're living in fantasy land if you think there will be. And so I think it really behooves, or it requires, the leagues to think out of the box. Is that global expansion? Is that, finding new revenue sources? I don't think there's a great way of monetizing digital content anywhere near the levels that it had before. But you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to try new things. You're going to have to try, pushing the envelope. I mean, you think about sports VC community at it, which is what, we talked about at the start. Everyone out there should be thinking of, like, how do we solve this problem? Like, this is a tremendous problem. There is no easy answer. I am sure the creativity of human engineering and ingenuity is going to help figure this out over time. But it is definitely going to be painful for all of these businesses as the TV industrial complex comes under pressure, unless big tech steps up. Look, if Apple or Amazon step up tomorrow and say, look, we're buying Monday Night Football instead of for the 2 billion ESPN pays, we're buying it for 3 billion. I mean, we're off to the races, and this is a different ballgame. We haven't seen that, but I think that sort of the challenge you're hitting on is there is no simple solution to that problem of how do you make the content available, but keep people watching full-length games with lots of advertising, lots of breaks. It's just hard for a younger generation to live in that world.
Yeah. When you gave the example of Rupert Murdoch in a 94 Fox buying the NFC package, he pioneered the idea that we could create an asset by doing that. In this case, the Fox Broadcast Network. One of the big challenges is those huge technology companies with the big market caps, they already have the customers. Yep. So they don't need to make a sports acquisition to get more customers. You could certainly better engage those customers. You could certainly sell more out. There's lots of things you could do with it, but they don't have the same urgency, dependency that the sports media companies, where I spent my career, that's what we have. And I think the only way to get to those really big sprawling numbers is going to be if the different tech companies decide that they're going to compete with each other for the rights to these, which is possible but not a given, right?
If you think about, let's take Apple for a second, because obviously Apple could buy sports rights with, the change that falls out of their pockets.
They could buy they could buy all sports rights.
Right. So, I mean, they could buy the whole league. I mean,
Yeah.
but let's think about this. Apple started Apple TV Plus. I could make a strong argument that if they bought Monday Night Football, that they would have a landmark piece of content that would drive people every week to the Apple TV, really differentiate Apple TV Plus. Like, you have to have it. It's the only way to watch Monday Night Football is to have Apple TV Plus, and that would drive tremendous engagement and excitement around having an Apple product and, being part of the Apple universe. Sure. But let's think about that. You're going to go spend $3 billion on Monday Night Football. It's 17 Monday nights, right? It disappears. The minute it ends, after the 3 hours, it's over. No one's watching that game hours later, if not a day later. There's no library value. Do you spend $3 billion a year on football rights, or do you spend $3 billion a year on more content that sits in your library and catalog forever, has no time-specific value to it, and builds the overall library value of the service? And I hear a lot of critics that would go, well, they can do both. They have the cash to do both. And that's certainly a fair criticism. And, it's possible. And I can make a strong argument of why they'd want to do it. The question is, do you have to do it? And maybe to the point that you're talking about, I also think that in the back of my mind, there's a little bit of this, God, the whole ecosystem was cracking. Everything, the bundle, advertising on TV, it was all starting to crack. Now we've got COVID. It's only going to make all of these things that much worse.
Yeah.
Why step in now? Like, over the next few years, this industry is going to, there's going to be some real problems facing this industry. And maybe we get to step in and buy these rights at a far different price point than where they are today. Like, why compete in the middle of this huge competition? Maybe we can take advantage of weakness. Now, again, if you think about Murdoch in your example, it was, hey, maybe that would have happened eventually for Rupert, but he just took the bull by the horns and said, look, we're in it to win it, and we're no looking back. I see both sides, but I think the point that rings truest for me, John, is that last piece that you mentioned, which is sports is not the be all end all for these companies. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, they're going to be super successful companies, whether or not they buy sports rights. Whereas if you think about the media companies, name any one of them that currently buy sports rights, you can't imagine any of those companies. I mean, just like you were talking about CBS, you can't fathom what those companies look like, nor can any investor imagine what those companies look like if they lose those rights.
Right, just central to what they do. But let's talk about happier topics. Sunday, 9:00 Eastern time, part 1 of the 10-part documentary, The Last Dance, about the 1997-1998 Chicago Bulls, historically great franchise. Ben Golliver in the Washington Post said it might also be called The Last Word, and Michael Jordan's got it. So this is huge for ESPN, right? But also seismic for Netflix, because the day after, Netflix gets to debut it outside the US.
I don't know the full story, but from what I understand, and I'm sure someone out there on this call may even have better information than me, but several years ago, Michael Jordan finally agreed to do this after being pushed for many, many years to do the documentary on his career. And he wanted to do a global deal. And so he did a global deal with Netflix. And that global deal with Netflix was all in process. It was being made, and it was supposed to come out purely on Netflix. And the NBA, I think, did some push to try to get a broadcast viewership of this in the US specifically. So only in the US, to make it more available outside of just Netflix, and push for this to be on ESPN. Especially ahead, I think it was supposed to premiere just ahead of the Olympics. It was supposed to be a feed into the Olympics in 2020 in Japan. And so there is this short window. I think there's basically a 90-day window where it's basically available on ESPN domestically. It'll be on Netflix July 15th or July, whatever. It's literally 3 months afterwards, it'll be on Netflix in the US. But the day after, it's available on Netflix in every other territory around the world. And so I think this is going to be first of all, it's going to be the only thing ESPN's had that's kind of new and fresh in weeks. So it's going to do tremendous ratings for ESPN. I think be a tremendous buzz. I've heard it's incredible from a content standpoint. And, if you think about being able to watch something like this ad-free, it's a 10-part series, you're gonna be able to watch this whole thing on Netflix in July. I think if you think about OJ, the documentary, my guess is most people think of OJ not as an FX show, they think about it as a Netflix show. My gut is you're going to look back in 12 months and people are going to think about this as a Netflix show because it's been available for so long, bingeable on Netflix, come this summer. But, again, the pandemic is certainly going to lead to way higher than ever would have been expected ratings for this show. And I'm really excited that Pitaro and team were able to push up the release of this because we're just dying for content right now.
Yeah. I don't know about whether or not Jordan and his people had a global deal with Netflix or not. When I was at ESPN, the one thing was the great success of the 30 for 30 documentary series and the OJ series, I think played a significant role in putting this deal together. And like you, I'm anxiously awaiting it. So are you sure that Netflix is not going to get into live sports? Here, they're obviously doing a sports documentary. Are you sure they're not going to get into live sports?
The two questions I get asked most, from the industry is Netflix going to do advertising and is Netflix going to do sports? And, I'm pretty confident that I can emphatically say no to both questions. And, let's go back to Apple for a second because it ties to Netflix. Part of the problem with sports rights, and this is an Apple issue as well as a Netflix issue, is that the rights are sold market by market. And, these are global companies and they like having content that is available and valuable and watchable forever. There's very little that you see on these services that is one and done. They're getting more into reality series, and my guess is you're probably not watching the same Love is Blind 4 times, but there's no time value. You could start Love is Blind right now and it would be just as good today as it was a few weeks ago. It's hard to see sports rights. They don't really have shelf value. Yes, there's classic games like we were talking about, but there's not a lot of shelf value to watching sports matchups days out, even hours after they happen, let alone days or weeks and years later. And so I think it's very hard to see, if you're sitting in Netflix's shoes, why you would do sports. Now, that said, if Netflix is at 300, 400, 500 million subs, years from now, and everyone's a subscriber, ARPU is up to $20 plus, and they've literally maxed out on how much entertainment content they can spend on. Yeah, look, I guess you should never say never. I think that's crazy to ever say never in this business, but I don't think in the next 5 years that's part of the plan or will be part of the plan. Just like I think there's not a whole lot of people watching this that are going, God, I wish there was ads on Netflix and it was a few dollars cheaper and that there was, 5 to 10 minutes of ads every hour that were disruptive. Like, there are zero people on this call, unless they work in the ad industry, that actually have that view.
See, I'll make you a bet that within the next 5 years, Netflix will add an option where you can get one ad per show, and it will be unbelievably successful based upon their personalization of technology. Imagine with the response they're getting from the Tiger King. Imagine you could get Netflix Netflix remains a great buy, at least in my opinion. Imagine you could get it for a lower price tier and you watch 1 30-second pre-roll before Tiger King came on. I think every marketer would be on their doorstep. I mean, I know in certain ways they are because they're getting integrations into shows and other stuff, but I'm more bullish on that part of it done differently than them getting into live sports, for what that's worth.
It's possible. The only thing I would say is they've raised price from $8 to $13 with how many businesses can raise price from 8 to 13 over 4 or 5 years? And subscribers effectively have tripled. Like, there's no pushback on pricing. There's no churn from pricing. People are, which just tells me that they're not at they are not at the correct pricing yet. I mean, there is still a lot of upside and headroom in their pricing. Maybe at the point where they hit that headroom, like where they hit that ceiling, John, maybe at that point advertising becomes more interesting. But I think if Netflix, over the next 12 months, Netflix goes to $15, I think there's essentially no pushback, because it's sort of like basic cable. Like, you can't imagine life without it.
It's like a utility. It's like utility for people. And I agree. Question from the audience. What do you think is the significance of 5G to sports and sports rights. The viewer is saying, how aggressive will T-Mobile and Verizon Wireless get in sports given their commitment to 5G? I'm sort of asking you a broader question about what you think the significance of 5G might be as you think about sports.
Well, I mean, look, my partner at Lightshed, Walt, it's Walt Lightshed. He is the expert in the world of 5G. I think if you look at what T-Mobile has done in trying to, be aggressive first with Netflix, basically Netflix on us, and now doing Quibi on us. You're seeing Verizon do basically at least a year of Disney Plus on us. I think all of these wireless companies, and I assume when HBO Max launches, it's going to be included as part of a lot of AT&T wireless subscriptions, and so kind of HBO Max on us if you're AT&T. Sort of all of these wireless companies are looking to differentiate with content. Sports, it's going to be interesting. I know, no offense to Verizon, but I would say I'm sort of underwhelmed with how they've marketed to date the NFL rights that they have. I think a lot of people don't realize that you don't even need a Verizon wireless phone anymore to watch NFL games. Anybody can do it with either the Yahoo Sports app or the NFL's own mobile app. But to me, it seems like the mobile rights for these sports events should really be heading towards platforms, because I don't think people think of carriers, they think of platforms. Like I'm still like, to me, if the NFL had their mobile games, the same mobile package that's on Verizon today, if that mobile package was on Facebook or Instagram,
right,
or
think about the
YouTube,
implication. Right.
Oh my God, like you would be sitting on the soccer field, like it would be so easy. You would, you're already using those applications every day. Again, they go back, they're utilities. Yahoo Sports is a utility for nobody, whereas Facebook is a utility, or Instagram. These are utilities you're on every day. And so I think if you're thinking about, if you're a league and you're trying to figure out how do you monetize, mobile rights, you have to be thinking about putting the content where the eyeballs are every single day. And I think the platforms like a Facebook, like a Google, YouTube are far better positioned than anyone else to do that. So I hope we see rights shift from carriers over to platforms. Obviously that hasn't happened yet, but we're hopeful that it does.
And it is an issue, while there's tremendous value to the league to get that distribution, it's always been a factor of who's willing to pay. Verizon's always been a big sponsor of leagues, et cetera. One thing we haven't talked about, and I think it's part of the answer to what comes next, is betting. I believe you're going to see, and this may get accelerated, sort of consortiums around rights and data and betting experiences, and potentially, especially post-COVID, accelerating the legalized state-by-state betting, the legalized mobile betting within those states. What do you think?
Look, it was already starting to happen. I mean, slower than we hoped. I mean, take a state like New York, where 4 upstate casinos basically control the process. California, you need a constitutional amendment in the state of California. So there are definitely like hurdles that slow this process down dramatically, that are frustrating. Because there is no legal, national framework for it. It's state by state, and so it's slow. The one thing I'll say is, with dramatically higher unemployment, with potentially a sustained or prolonged recession, if you're thinking about from a government standpoint, hey, how do we create new incremental revenues quickly? Whether it's taxing betting, taxing cannabis, like you got to believe that they're going to be thinking of like, how do we get creative to manufacture revenues quickly on things that people are already doing, that if we legalize them and tax them, we could make a lot of money off of. And
right.
I have to believe that certain states, especially ones that are most impacted right now by COVID, have to be thinking along those lines. And so I hope that we see a meaningful clearing of all of the hurdles. That said, there's a lot of, how the sausage gets made in terms of, clearing the way for betting. Even I've been surprised just how complicated it is, and how every state, there are different kind of people with their fingers in the pudding that makes this more difficult to actually, it's not just, hey, pass a rule, yes, that's good. It is just, unfortunately, a lot more complicated than that. But God, it's already happening. I mean, like, everyone's already doing this, in the quasi-legal world out there. It's not like this behavior isn't happening. You can see it with all of the, whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings, like, people want to do this.
Yeah.
People are driving from New York over the border into Jersey. I mean, it's absurd that you have to drive through the Lincoln Tunnel to make a bet, to go to Jersey. Like, it's just absurd.
Yeah. Since, this also gets to some of the stuff you cover. Since every business is impacted and the federal government can only address so many industries, do you see the M&A business in sports getting liberalized a bit and heating up? Like certain things that, well, we couldn't see that happening. Now it could happen.
How do you mean? Explain. Tell me what you're thinking.
I'm thinking about tie-ups between Dish and others. Spin-offs of properties that you're just going to have more consolidation, and not every industry can go to the federal government and say you have to bail us out. So for those who are in trouble, is it possible that some acquisitions or mergers could get done, that there's just going to be a more liberalized environment? This is just conjecture.
Yeah,
is that something you guys think about at all?
I mean, look, we've already been, Walt, and you mentioned our 20 for 20, one of Walt's predictions in there, this is Walt Piecyk, his prediction was Dish and DirecTV merge this year. It just, you saw T-Mobile and Sprint be approved. It's hard to see how Sprint and T-Mobile are allowed to merge, and DirecTV and Dish wouldn't be allowed to merge. I mean, those are businesses that are losing, a substantial number of subscribers. We talked about the pressures on the multi-channel universe, and unlike when you think about the universe that's out there from the standpoint of the multi-channel universe, they don't have the broadband component that plays out with companies like Comcast and Charter. I mean, yeah, Comcast is going to get hurt by COVID on its NBC business and maybe advertising and even enterprise on the cable side, but the broadband piece is going to keep Comcast incredibly vibrant and probably better off in terms of people upgrading to higher speed tiers. It just seems like the time is right for a merger of satellite platforms that are in the broadcast video business. So yeah, I think there are deals out there that already should have happened, that might even get accelerated because of this environment where it gets easier politically. And take TV stations, right? I mean, these are businesses. If we're in a sustained recession and autos are pulling back like they did in 2009, the problem right now is that all of these TV station groups have levered up. Some of them have even, like Sinclair, they've even bought RSNs. You think about that and you go, what is that business going to look like? If auto spend is down 25 to 30%. I mean, we've been looking at the iSpot data that tracks kind of overall spending on advertising on TV. And if you looked over the last 12 months, 12 of the 60 top advertisers on TV were car companies. In the last couple of weeks, only 3 of them are left and none are in the top 30. So the car companies are fleeing the TV ad market. That's uniquely bad for local TV. I don't see how those companies don't look for consolidation on the back of this.
Okay, so I want to end on a little more happy, or at least upbeat number. I've just been struck, as you said, where every day is Groundhog Day. You just, you get focused on things that are sort of must-have in your life. I'm not talking about our families, other stuff, or food, but like, for instance, like for me, one of them is Twitter.
It's not toilet paper for you?
Well, no. Although one of the life hacks I have to recommend to everybody is the forgotten giant eBay. eBay, it turns out, is an awesome place to find staples that are hard to find at your grocery store or an Apple or excuse me, on Amazon. But I was coming back, like, I have found Twitter increasingly to be indispensable to me. Headline service, smartest people going, real-time information on any number of things. I know you're a bull on them as well.
Well, look, we love Twitter stock. And I mean, look, the hard part in the short term, like, let's just be honest, this is the realities, is that advertisers pay to launch products on Twitter. I mean, you saw it with Disney Plus. I mean, phenomenal use of the platform, right? Everywhere you looked, it was on Twitter. You know, phenomenal use of all social media, but there's no doubt that Twitter ad spend is heavily tied to events and things happening, whether it's NCAA tournament, NBA finals. I'm sure you'll see a lot of spending around the draft next week, as you just mentioned, for the NFL. But the pullback in events is really problematic for a company in the short term like Twitter. But the good news is, and the reason we're excited as a, you know, if I think about, I can't do anything about the pandemic right now, but I can look forward and go, what stocks do I want to own as we come out of this over the course of the next 12 months? And I can look at a stock like Twitter and go, even without sports on TV, which is such a fundamental part, you know, sports Twitter is a thing. Even without sports, Twitter's usage is growing faster than it's ever grown in its history. And on the other side of this, advertising will come back. You know, they are not small business weighted. They don't have small businesses advertising like Facebook or Google. They have, you know, the top 500 companies represent a dramatic share of Twitter's advertising. And so I think Twitter is really well positioned with greater usage, an increasingly good product, more time spent per person per day on the service as you're talking about. I think Twitter is one of the most interesting stocks to own as you look out over the next 12 months. They are something where the stock's been hurt, no doubt about it, as a lot of stocks have, but they really stand to be a big winner when the world comes back over the next 12 months.
Okay. So Rich, thank you. And both of us would like to thank Jeff and the group at NYVC Sports for organizing the first office hours. There'll be more of these to come, so please stay tuned at the Sport Hiatus website and check their Twitter feeds. Thank you, Rich. Stay well. To all the audience, please, we hope that you and your families are safe and sound, and that we can come out of this. And it might be watching a ball game with no one in the stands, but we hope that comes soon. Okay.
I hope so too. I love Sports Hiatus as a brand, but I really hope the Sports Hiatus stops pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Maybe we can raise the toggle button up. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
So I wanted to thank everyone. First of all, what a tremendous dialogue. Rich and John, there are probably no two better pros in the industry, better truth tellers. This was a tremendous dialogue, and no two better people to start off our first office hours than Rich and John. So truly, on behalf of all of us, thank you. By the way, what an office, Rich. I hope we share the same shoe size, because I'm going to come on over and try out some stuff.
I wish it was actually my own.
So truly, thank you. The second thing I wanted to thank a bunch of people. It takes a village, but our advisory board, Deepan, Joe, Tom, Blake, Dan, Asher, Jeremy, Mandy, Donna, John, many others. Thank you. I want to thank the Live Like team for all the features in the right rail. We're going to continue to optimize over time. But Lawrence and Justin and Mihir, really cool products. And for those of you who don't know Live Like, I strongly recommend checking out what they do. To the quiet sort of voice in the background, although I'm sure he's never been called quiet before, Carlo DeMarcus, whose original vision, the concept of Sport Hiatus has been. And then please follow social media, NYVC Sports, Sport Hiatus. Please follow Lightshed. There's no better content on the internet. Follow Rich personally, follow John Kosner personally. If you're on Twitter, if you're on LinkedIn, regardless of the platform, these are the innovators, thought leaders in our space. And I think we're all really lucky to be able to spend some time hearing what you guys had to say. So really, truly, thank you. And then lastly, I'm going to read our mission, which was written by a number of us. And I think it summarizes our conversation best, which is please support our leagues, our teams, our athletes, our broadcasters, our publishers, brands, agencies, partners, entrepreneurs, investors. This is an unprecedented window of time without live sports. It's a hiatus, but it is temporary. We're one team. Sports never stop. Fans never stop. So be creative, keep innovating, be safe. And this will be available on demand shortly thereafter. And we'll be coming back with more information and news on future office hours. So with that, thank you, everyone. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Thanks.